Hello and welcome to another episode of The Leong Form. What's with that neck turn to me?
I don't know because I like stretching in the morning. Like that.
Okay. Like, who's starting first? Anyhow, I'm Stanley and together with Hossan, this is The Leong Form hosted by two brothers, blood brothers. And we hope you've enjoyed all the past episodes so far because today we're excited to bring you yet another brand new episode. And Hossan, for some strange reason, I just feel very safe and secure for this episode.
In my Leong arms.
Not in Leong arms lah, but safe and secure in the sense that, you know, whether it's physical or psychological or emotional, our guest is able to kind of put you at ease, not at rest, put you at ease. You know, that whole comfort level about having our guest today, whom we shall introduce shortly.
Because even if you're feeling amazing, fine and dandy today, you never know what will happen tomorrow, right? And you know, change is the only constant in life. And so how do you roll with these punches? Well, I have the punchlines, but our guest will have the lifelines. Dr. Jade Kua is in the house, so welcome to the Leong Form, Jade.
Hi,
Hello,
thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. I mean, you practice emergency medicine, you have explored holistic health, and also you are a life and team coach. You do a lot of things. So you're almost literally health and healing personified.
No, thank you.
Wow.
Yeah, but how did you get on this path though? I mean, because you were originally A&E, pediatrician, trauma and stuff like that. So how did you end up coming onto this path?
I think I'd been doing emergency medicine full-time for about 2 decades. And I sort of came to a realization that life was a lot more than just being alive. And I got curious about what else there was to good health and what that meant. And so I explored coaching first as a client, and I really enjoyed what that coaching process did for me. So with coaching, it's very goal-directed. You move forward in life. You have a different perspective that is shown to you. It's not just about solutions per se, but coaching really allows you to take another look at yourself. So I really enjoyed that process, which I felt was very helpful for my mental and emotional health. And then I started exploring, learning about coaching. Got through the various levels, enjoyed it so much that I set up an academy where I teach people to become professional life coaches now. And it's been a really wonderful process. I feel so happy, and I'm really, really glad that I'm able to do all of this right now.
All right. So you were almost, you could say, a beneficiary of, you know, coaching. Therefore, you saw the value and merit in it. And therefore, you decided, okay, let's do more. Let's delve into this further. Let's set up an academy.
Totally. I feel like, you know, the joy of coaching, if you will, or the benefits of coaching should be shared with as many people as possible.
Yeah. Although I'm curious whether or not you had any coaching instructions, just training to be a pediatrician. Were there components of that for you to become a ped?
That's a really good question. So I think in training to be a pediatric emergency physician, we are definitely beneficiaries of great mentorship. So there are a lot of mentors, there are a lot of supervisors at work as well. And so I had the experience of being mentored and being a mentor to the younger doctors. The difference between that and coaching is that a mentor tends to come from a place of experience, wisdom, and so they do help you to find your solutions to get ahead because of what they know. For a coach, though, a coach respects that you are healthy and whole and able to make your own decisions and that you are the expert of your life. So a coach would really ask you questions to evoke awareness and move you forward in a goal of your choice. So they don't set the agenda for you. You set the agenda as the client, and a coach helps you to get there. At the end of the session, there's a lot of insight, there's a lot of learning, and ideally that learning should also be applied to a situation beyond what you've come with. So in that sense, coaching is very helpful for your whole life, not just the presenting problem that you came with.
Yeah.
So it's about, this is life coaching we're talking about, right?
That's right.
So you've set up Jade Academy. Are you running it by yourself? I mean, do you have a team behind you? Because it seems like a lot of work on your shoulders, right?
Yes, I do have a great team. And the team is, you know, composed of not just myself, but full-time staff. We have part-time staff. We have lots of interns. We have volunteers as well. And all the coach trainees that come in to learn, they also help to provide coaching to the community. So in that sense, we're all having impact on society together. And that's very fulfilling. So I feel like we raise up the staff and the people that are part of the team, because we're doing work together, fulfilling work together. For example, we provide pro bono coaching for charities. So charities that are involved in the caregiving space, such as the Singapore Red Cross, many of the member organizations of the Singapore Council of Women's Organizations. So we provide pro bono coaching for them. We also provide subsidized coaching, making mental and emotional health very accessible to people. So in that sense, I feel like the coaches, they don't just learn about how to become a good coach. They're also able to give impact. They'll be able to make an impact on society as they move along. And I think that's really powerful to do that together as a team.
Right. And we were talking about it the other day about mental well-being, mental health, because you brought that up as well. How does one decide that, I'm not in the right state? Because sometimes people go like, I'm just burnt out. Then they use the word depressed, or
Sure.
these words just bandy around like
Indeed.
that.
Yeah. Well, the truth of the matter is that coaching is helpful for not just people who are burnt out. They're actually helpful for anybody at any time of their lives. So it's a little bit like going to the gym. You don't just go to the gym when you're completely obese or when you're keeling over from a heart attack. In fact, you should be going every day or every week when you're healthy. And that allows you to tune up your body,
for sure.
to reduce the chances of you having say a breakdown. So similarly, coaching is really helpful in your everyday lives to be able to navigate, say, work-life balance, for example, or making decisions which might be, even happy decisions, such as going for a promotion, or dealing with something that's a little bit more negative, say retrenchment. So in that sense, coaching is for anyone, anytime. But it is true that people usually think about seeking help when something bad happens. This is a very human sort of like behavior, to feel like, well, I really only want to pay for coaching if something bad is happening in my life. So we do still see clients who are going through some sort of crisis in their lives, and we help them to get to a better place, wherever it is that they want to get to. The coaches are trained to pick up signs of, say, depression or clinical anxiety, and the right thing to do, the ethical and professional thing to do, is to refer them to see a psychiatrist.
Right.
So they are taught to pick up signs and refer out to someone else who is an expert of that particular condition.
I'd be interested in finding out what these signs are, because if we can help it, someone in our lives, could be a colleague, could be a family member, is displaying those signs, then we're able to pick it out and then hopefully try to seek, some sort of form of way we can get attention and help to that person. But you talk about mental health, but we also want to, understand more about how you would differentiate between mental health as well as just, stress in general. We all undergo stress at the workplace, in relationships, different shapes and forms as well. But where do we draw the line and say, okay, this is really getting into the whole arena of mental well-being? It's eating into me, it's eroding my self-worth and value, and I'm just losing interest in life.
Yeah, I think you summarized it quite well. So, when someone is sad or having a reaction to a situation that's happening that they have the resources to get through, simply by reaching out to friends maybe, or having a chat about it, they can get over it. However, for those who dwell on it, ruminate, they find sometimes that their values are eroded, I think was the term that you used, their sense of self-worth, when they're unable to function as they did before. And these huge things change. Previously they used to spend time with their family. Now that value has changed. Previously they used to look after themselves, but now they're quite unkempt, and they, their values and their behavior has changed. That's certainly a big warning sign that something bad is happening. The ironic thing is that a lot of people are unable to pick that up when it's happening to themselves. They're unable to figure that out because they're already in this sort of
deep well.
Yes, they're in a deep well, they're in a big black hole. And that's why it's so important to have external resources as well for your support. And it might be friends, it might be family, it might be a coach, someone else who can give you that other perspective to say, hey, I feel like maybe you need to have a chat with somebody. I've noticed that this is happening. How can I help? And that's very helpful for people who are in that that black hole where all they see is their own perspective. And if left unchecked, many bad things can happen. People are often critical of others when they seek poor decisions, such as committing suicide. And critics, they say things like, well, didn't that person realize how lucky he was? Didn't that person realize that he's from such a good family, such a good profession? Didn't that person realize there are children who are starving in Africa? Didn't that person realize there are people who are dying of cancer? Why would this particular person choose to take their lives? But what they don't understand is that this person is not thinking about those things at all.
Of course.
They are in their own world. They're completely isolated, and it's really hard for them to have the perspective that other people who are healthy and whole can see. So what they need is someone who's who's empathetic, who will reach out, who can see past the flaws of that person in that situation, because that person might not be very lovable. That person might be quite angry. That person might be rude. That person might not give, adorable vibes, but you still have to reach out to them and ask them how you can help and hopefully be able to refer them to someone who can help them. At that point, when someone is contemplating suicide, actually the right person to see is a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
And that is what our trainee coaches are trained to pick up as well, the signs of suicidal ideation, so that they can refer the person to someone who's an expert, which is not the realm that a coach should be working with.
I see.
Hossan, have you ever been in that deep, dark state before in your life?
It's interesting you ask that, because the entertainment industry is very, very, how would I put it? Toxic.
Toxic.
It's very toxic. And I mean, I'm very fortunate to be able to have friends around me in the industry that actually support one another. And I'm one of those that will go, "Are you okay?" all the time to my friends, to my colleagues. But personally, sometimes I do get into that funk. But then, I because I'm a Christian, so I'm very happy that I have a higher power that I can pray and I find comfort in that. But depression, I don't think I ever have gone into that.
So comedy is quite a good medication for it.
But you see, the thing is, comedy is sometimes a mask for a lot of comedians are very depressed. I mean, case in point, we had Robin Williams who took his own life. And having said that, just yesterday, I'm going to admit right now that I had a little cry. Because it was a bit like, I'm so stressed with the show. I'm directing a show and you're on top. And when you're on top, it's true. It's lonely at the top. No one else can understand the stress that I go through directing a show. And then, who do you talk to? So I'm very grateful I have got my best friend, Ben, and I just call him, I rant. I'm like, what's going on in my life? But he's amazing, and we both help one another because he's gone through a lot as well. So he says, just let it out. I mean, you have to talk to it. You have to talk through it.
Yes.
And what is your opinion on that? Is that something people should do?
I think that's very helpful, because I feel that through conversation, as you put your thoughts and feelings into words, you increase your self-awareness. And that's very helpful. And in fact, we do that a lot in the coaching conversation, where the coach will really only speak about 20% of the time, and the rest of the time is the client.
Okay.
So this is something that's important to understand. I think people sometimes, when they come into a coaching session for the first time, they take out their pen and paper and they're like, okay, what am I here to learn? And I'm like, okay, it doesn't really work that way, but let's see, let's try and learn together, So the coach really asks questions to evoke awareness, and the client comes up with the answers.
Right.
And through that process of speaking, of telling them what's going on their minds, what are the reasons behind this, what their hopes and aspirations are, what their fears are, that is so helpful for the client. So the whole conversation is client-focused. And yes, talking is therefore really, really helpful.
Wonderful.
You can always call me Coco.
Okay, I will. The other thing I was wondering about, right? Because we talk about mental well-being, we spoke a bit about suicide. Is there a trauma involved? But then, childhood trauma maybe, even as you're growing up, and therefore all this kind of manifests later in life, and then, addictions.
Yes.
And because I think we spoke about this before, no one wakes up one morning and goes, I want to be a drug addict. I mean, what happens along the way? So, do you deal with people with trauma as well?
I would probably say the simple answer to that is that a coach, the premise of a coaching conversation is that the client in that conversation is healthy, whole, and able to make their decisions. So they are able to move forward towards their own goals. For someone who is ill, the best person to see them would be a psychiatrist.
Yes.
Because not only do they do talk therapy, but they also diagnose, they treat, sometimes with medication as well. So a psychiatrist is a doctor who is best placed to treat people with medical issues, talking about mental health issues. In between that whole spectrum of mental wellness and illness, there are therapists, psychologists, counselors, and they are very well placed to help the client to maybe go back into their past and pull out what trauma led them to make this decision now and what's going on in their life. So that form of conversation is best held with a therapist or a counselor or a psychologist. With a coach, the simple answer is that they're meant not to talk to patients, but rather with clients. However, it is true that people are multifaceted and they've been through many experiences in their lives. So as long as my client who might have a mental health condition is concurrently seeing a psychiatrist, is concurrently seeing his therapist, I would be very happy to help them to get through their coaching conversation towards their goal.
Yeah.
But they have to be seeing their psychiatrist or their therapist at the same time for their mental health condition.
Okay, so it's not just a one person fix all, but you really need those other roles and support pillars around that person.
Absolutely.
Now, we talk about mental health, but yet I believe, don't know if you would agree, Dr. Jade, that there's still a lot of stigma involved. I mean, in the old days, right, whenever someone is showing signs and symptoms of mental health incidents, you would say, oh, that person's gone a little bit, off the rails. You identify that person with going to Woodbridge Hospital. Back then it was called.
Yes.
Of course, now it's IMH. Still a lot of stigma involved. Has that stigma decreased, you think, in this day and age?
I think the COVID pandemic has definitely helped to lift the veil on mental and emotional stress. A lot of people were more open about it as they ranted, if you will, or spoke about it on social media during those days of isolation. So I think social media has certainly helped a lot to normalize mental health conversations. There is no perfect medium, obviously, and there are many problems also associated with social media, but that's a conversation for another day. But for sure, I feel that people are more open to talking about it. There's still a stigma that's attached to it, though, and I feel that the only way to really make us have healthy conversations about this is to simply have more of them. So a podcast like that, for example, I think will be very, very helpful. Thanks so much, Leong Brothers.
It's interesting to hear about this because a lot of people are starting to self-diagnose, and then you go like, I got ADHD. I'm like, have you seen a doctor about it? Why do you say do you have that?
Yes.
Like, so what are your thoughts on self-diagnosis?
And going back to your earlier point also, sorry,
Sure.
You mentioned that sometimes that person can't even realize that I'm in this situation because they're just so deep dark in that black hole you mentioned.
Yes. So I think that it is great that people are more interested in their health, including their mental health. And if they're able to Google some symptoms and try and figure out if they need to seek help, that's very good. We want to raise, the sort of literacy of everybody, the health literacy of everybody. However, it is dangerous to stop there. It is dangerous to say, I believe I have this condition and I'm going to not seek help. I'm going to try and help myself. I think it is helpful to look for either a coach or a psychologist or a psychiatrist, somebody else to confirm whether or not you have this issue or not, and then really deal with the outcome of that conversation.
Because sometimes I guess you need medication, you need counseling, you need to talk to someone about it.
Sure. I feel like it is really not just about self-diagnosing or recognizing a situation. It is trying to figure out what to do after that.
Yeah.
So coping with this situation. Maybe that person is right. Maybe that person has correctly self-diagnose their mental and emotional health situation. And sure, but what are you going to do about it? So coping with that, being, developing that resilience muscle in order to do well and cope with life whilst living with that condition, whether it's ADHD or depression or something else, that is key. So seeking help from a mental health service provider is super important. If you see a coach and that person agrees with you that you have this condition, they should be referring you out to someone else. If you see a psychiatrist, they'll be able to not just diagnose you, but also treat you. And that's really important.
Let's talk about also the psychological and emotional link to physical health as well. What would be that correlation there in terms of how we feel and think and physically how we are being able to live life?
I feel like the bond is really strong between all the components of well-being. And I'm not just talking about physical, mental, and emotional health, but also financial health, environmental health. I mean, these social health, these are all interlinked. Personally, I feel like if I don't eat well or sleep well, then my mental and emotional health is really poor.
Okay, so if we're seeing you when you're hungry, we better not.
That's what, I don't know where hangry comes from.
I become a bear.
Yeah, it's true though, because I feel that if especially when I work crazy hours in the job that I do, I don't get enough rest sometimes. And even if I rest or go to bed, my brain doesn't stop. And that affects my sleep quality, which then the next day I become this grumpy old man, So how does one just like calm down? I don't understand. I don't want to rely on medication.
And you shouldn't, right?
And, I mean,
if
depends
you
on how
just
bad
take
it is.
what you need. Yes.
Yeah.
Not more.
So, as a coming from where you're coming from, how do you calm down after a long day at work?
For me, I feel like it's really important to meditate.
Okay.
So for me, meditating in between sort of different sessions of the day is very important. So it's not just from waking to sleeping, but rather from, say, being in the hospital to spending time with my family, from spending time with my family to, say, coaching a client or teaching a class, a coaching class. In between these sessions, I meditate, and it takes really about 3 minutes or so. It's just a breathing exercise, body scanning, being present. I would say that initially, when I first started meditating about maybe 15 years ago, I was very wary of it. I too am a Christian.
Right.
So I was concerned that it meant that you had to sort of empty your mind out and not focus on God. But I found that it's really just a breathing technique, and to be able to be hygienic in how you feel. Yes, to be centered, to be self-aware, to be present, I think is probably the best way to put it. And that allows me to also be kind to myself, to have that loving kindness, and accept that I am not a superhuman. I am tired. There's a pain in my neck. I'm feeling nervous, maybe, but that's okay. And then just to embrace whatever happens after that. So I find that's helpful in between different sessions when I have to switch roles, and it's particularly helpful when I'm trying to get to sleep.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah,
thanks for the tip. Yeah, I mean, over the weekend, I was attending a class as well, and I learned from one of my fellow trainees in that class about breathing, and there's this 4x4 box technique of breathing. You inhale, you hold, and then you exhale.
Oh yeah.
Or even if you're stressed, she talked about rubbing your hands together or doing the feeling your.
I thought this one also because if you needed to go to the toilet and you have to hold on. No, apparently it's true. Because Joanna told me, my friends, she said, okay, if you can't find a loo, especially if you're traveling in Paris, you don't want to go to those loos outside, you just do this.
Interesting.
Sorry, this is just a digression, but anyway.
Well, not really, because maybe this is how your physical, cues can help you to control your mental and emotional thoughts as well, and even your bladder.
Yeah, it distracts you maybe, right?
That's funny.
Distraction. So let's talk about also other perhaps ways in which we can perhaps recognize certain signs, symptoms. You have already mentioned some of these as well. But if it's say a colleague of ours that we're working closely with, and we're noticing a change in behavior, change in mood, not just one day, but it's gone on for a week and maybe longer, or the manager as well. Yeah, what other cues can we pick up? Because you're the expert in this area of sensing something's amiss.
Yes.
What other cues can we try to pick out?
If we sense that there's a change, or if we identify there's a change in how they look, how they speak,
Work performance,
in their work performance, yes. So those would definitely be red flags, But other than picking up cues and trying to figure out if somebody needs help, we could also concurrently show them small acts of kindness. So we don't have to wait until we figured out, yes, he's depressed, and then go up to them with a big speech on how they need help. In between, we can still show them acts of kindness. And it doesn't have to be, I think you're depressed, I'm not sure about it. Rather, it could be, would you like a cup of coffee? Would you like to go for a walk? I have an extra ticket for a play. Would you like to have it? Just simple acts of kindness, I feel, can help that person also to be lifted out of their situation. Oh, wow, someone's asked me to go for a walk. Maybe my situation isn't so hopeless after all. Because I feel like a lot of the times when people are sort of sinking lower and lower into that deep, dark hole, what it is that keeps them there is that feeling of hopelessness.
And isolation, right? Sometimes.
That isolation, the feeling that no one cares, the feeling that they're all alone.
Yeah.
And so when someone just gives them a glimmer of kindness, I feel like that can be very, very helpful.
It's a good support system as well. Not just your one person. Maybe you could get your colleagues or your friends to say, "Hey, let's all chip in and kind of, rally around that person."
Yes. And because those acts of kindness can be done by anybody, you also don't have to feel like, well, I kind of want to say something to this person, but I'm not that close. I feel like I might offend that person. So don't say the offensive thing. Just show an act of kindness, show them you care, and then see what happens after that.
One question has come up in my mind a lot, because as we get older, I don't know, but I think a lot of, especially men, they tend to withdraw away from community. I don't know. It seems that way to me. You suddenly, I have friends going like, I don't need any more friends. Then you start closing up and clamping up.
Yeah.
And that's not good. So what advice would you give for someone to just like get out there and have a community? I think women are much better at that. I think so.
I want to affirm what you just said. I would say that a majority of the clients that come to me for coaching are actually men. And it is on the back of being sort of isolated for a long time, and then they decided they wanted to speak to somebody. And I'm grateful, of course, that they chose to speak to me.
Especially after retirement.
After retirement.
Suddenly they lost their purpose.
Or they lose their job.
Or they lose
when
their
they've
job.
lost their jobs, or when they're contemplating something huge in their business, whether it's a merger or something, it tends to be a lonely decision. It tends to be a weighted decision, and they feel like they want to talk to somebody. And I'm really glad that we have a lot of people that come for leadership coaching or transformative coaching. To be honest, you can put any label you want to it. It is really simply life coaching. But I'm grateful for that opportunity to have conversations with these men. To your question about what they should do, I would say that when you're happy and healthy, and you're living your life routinely, it's good to build in sources of support, such as a cycling group or a makan group or a coffee mate, So that's helpful. A lot of ladies have book clubs now, and I think that's really helpful. You don't necessarily have to get together to talk about mental and emotional health.
No.
Just, make
Hang
friends,
out.
And interest
hang out, have relationships.
Yeah.
And I think that's helpful.
Yeah, I think that's also perhaps a pitfall that some couples, as they get into their older senior years, they still are just so dependent on each other. They do everything together, but when one party, unfortunately may pass on before that remaining party, then it's like the ground
end of
just
the world.
Yes,
crumbles.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Yes, that's really sad. And I think it's fantastic that a lot of schools have these sort of like befriender programs where they send volunteers out to make friends with an older person, maybe help to clean the house, maybe just have a conversation, and that's fantastic. I think it's always great to have volunteer groups, whether in a community center or in church or a place of worship, to make friends with people who are otherwise quite lonely. However, they may not be trained to have that conversation if there's a mental and emotional issue that comes up. So therefore, I feel like that's really important when you seek a coach, that someone is trained to have this conversation with you, and that person also has a coach.
Yeah.
I feel like if you seek a coach who doesn't themselves have a coach, what's going on?
Exactly.
Speak to somebody who is walking the talk.
So speaking of coaching then, right? So how does one become a coach? I mean,
Do you have any interest in doing that?
I don't know. I mean,
Hey,
In your
if,
retirement
I
years?
have to deal with so many people every day. I'm coaching everyone. Maybe I need a coach.
hey.
So how does one, make that first step?
Well, I would say that legally, you don't actually have to have a coaching license to become a coach. So yes, Hossan, you could be a coach. You could set up the Hossan Leong coaching business right now.
No, it's okay.
I want a certified coach.
Certified.
Yes. However, I feel like because of the weight of the conversations we deal with, it is so important to be trained, and therefore a mark of how well that person has been trained tends to be accreditation. That's what it is. I'm not like a certificate seeker or anything like that, but I do feel like it is a mark of how well you know your work. So I do encourage people who are interested to become a coach to go for training, to be accredited, and even the coach training provider that you're going to should also be accredited, because there's a certain amount of auditing that's involved, and that's really important. So Jade Life and Wellness Coaching Academy has all of that. So we are audited by the International Coaching Federation. We also have... that's the ICF.
ICF,
That's
right?
right.
Okay.
So I am myself trained via the ICF. I'm also accredited by the EMCC, which is the European Mentoring and Coaching Council. Those are the two main large coaching boards in the world. And I sort of felt like I wanted to understand, the both sides' perspectives. So I feel like when you look for a coach, ask them what their credentials are. That's important. Ask them if they themselves have a coach that they see. That's important too.
Yes.
And I feel like that chemistry is also important. It is true that you should have you should trust your coach. So in order for there to be that culture of trust and safety, seek a coach that you have chemistry with, whom you trust.
Hey, you go lah. You got Skills Future, right?
Yeah, and you can use Skills Future, right?
Yes,
for
that's
your
right. So I
academy.
am so delighted to announce that Jade Life and Wellness Coaching Academy is also credentialed by Skills Future to be able to accept these types of grants.
Congratulations on that.
Yay!
But for those who have come through this coaching route through your academy as well, do they tend to become full-time coaches thereafter, or is it sort of like on the sides, or is it just something that they would find useful in
Right.
their day-to-day relationships?
The answer is D, all of the above. So many of the coaches who come to us are adults who have maybe had some experience in a startup business or even a ground-up initiative, and they now want to embark on the next phase of their lives to become professional coaches. Some of them are they're head of finance, they're in a big bank, they're a CEO of a big company, and they want to learn how to be a coach simply to be able to have those skill sets, which include active listening, evoking awareness, facilitating learning and development. So really important for top leaders to be able to do that for their staff, their team. And so some people also just want to learn how to be coaches because they feel like this is important in their lifestyle. For example, many parents, they want to learn that so that they can be better parents, not necessarily for professional reasons.
Right.
And the cost of, learning to become a coach is gentle enough that one can do that. It's not, a huge commitment that would cause you to have to mortgage your house or something like that. And so therefore, in that sense, learning this is so easy. It's really a matter of whether or not you want to do it, whether you feel like this is right for you. in your phase of life. And we try to make these educational resources accessible to people.
Right.
How long is the course though?
I was going to ask how intense it is.
How intensive and how long does it happen?
Right. So for basic level coaching, which is the ACC level, it's really 60 hours of classroom sessions, and that's easy enough to do, particularly because we have blended learning. So we have 30 hours of face-to-face time, and some of it's in person, some of it's on Zoom, and then the rest of the 30 hours is self-work. Evidence of the work needs to be done, so if I give you a book, I do need to see your report, but it makes it easy for people to incorporate this kind of learning whilst they have their own working lives or their own family lives. And so it's quite gentle in that sense. What is a little bit trickier is the logbook. So you do need, in addition to the 60 hours of class hours, you do need 100 hours of log experience. And that's important, of course, because you want someone who's credentialed to be a coach to actually have some sort of coaching experience. And learning the theory of it isn't the same as having that practicum too. Because we have Jade Life and Wellness Coaching Clinic that is attached to our academy, every coach who comes through us as a trainee is able to complete their logbook quite easily.
Okay.
It's really a matter of your own resources. So if you say, well, I have time to coach like 2 clients this week, then I'll field 2 clients for you. And some of it might be with me supervising on the side, particularly if you're less experienced. And maybe you have more time now because you've got maybe, a break from work. And you say, well, I can coach every day. I can coach 2 people every day. Could you provide clients for me to coach from my logbook? And I'd be able to do that because we have so many people that come to our coaching clinic. So many people of varying resources. Some of them want to pay top dollar to be coached by the top coach. Some of them have, gentler resources, and they say, well, I'd really like to be coached by someone from your academy, but it doesn't necessarily have to be you. And I trust that you will feel the coach that's appropriate for me. And so we do that. I think I'm inspired, in part by the public hospital system, because there's that concept of subsidized healthcare versus private healthcare, and that whole, the different categories that you can pay into allows you really to be seen by a healthcare provider. No matter what your resources are. And I just want to be clear that when I talk about resources, I'm not just talking about money, I'm talking about time and energy as well. And that's really important. So that initial conversation that I have with someone who comes to us as a client will involve that. How much time do you have for this? When do you need to have your goal accomplished by? What are your resources? And after that, I'm able to help them to sort of do a bit of matchmaking, if you will, with an appropriate coach. That's what we do.
So matchmaking, not just in the sense of, how much it may cost. I like that analogy that you had brought up right before we started about going to a hair salon, right? You got the junior stylist, the senior stylist, maybe director level as well.
Exactly.
So I like that analogy. It helps us understand better as well. So apart from coaching, you've got the clinic as well, you mentioned. So there's the academy, there's the clinic. Tell us more about the sort of services also that we can seek out at the clinic. I mean, we talked about mental wellness, but is that all that it should be about? We have those issues and then we go to the clinic?
So the people who come to the clinic tend to ask for something like career coaching, for example, or leadership coaching, or they might ask for personal branding coaching. That has come up a lot over the past year.
Branding.
So people come up for personal branding. So I allow them to ask for whatever it is that they want in terms of coaching. I don't tell them what they need, rather they tell me what they need, and then I match them up with an appropriate coach whose training has directed them towards this sort of specialty, if you will. Other than life coaching, we do have people who come to us for health coaching. So with health coaching, we look at good sleep, good nutrition. We have a dietitian that works with us as well. And that's very helpful.
Yeah.
But I don't see medical patients there.
Sure.
Yes.
We talked about the personal branding. Some people come to you and say, we want to be coached on personal branding. Like, for example, we're both brands. I think everyone's a brand, right?
Yes.
So what kind of case study is that though? I mean, can you share a case study about personal branding?
Oh, totally. So it's really interesting. Once more, this is simply a label, but it allows people to be focused on what it is that they want to be coached on, for example. Similarly, when people say they want to come in for leadership coaching or if they want to come in for, transformative coaching, they're labels, but it does help somebody to be able to focus on what it is they want to get out of this. So no problem with that. When it comes to personal branding, it might be, say, somebody who's about to start their own business and they want to be portrayed as a certain type of brand so that they can gain trust, for example, with the consumer. It might also be a leader who wants to gain trust with their team. It could even be a parent, it could be anybody. What it is that it allows somebody to be more self-aware, to figure out what's authentic for them, and allows them to grow in the strengths that they want to project. So I love that because coaching is really about learning and development, to be perfectly honest. So personal branding, something relatively new, I think, in my team. It's really only been, there's been a lot of demand for that over the past year. You even have people who don't work. So I think the colloquial term for it is tie-ties, who come in for coaching and they say, I feel like I've been looked at as a certain kind of person and I would like people to see me as something else.
Exactly.
So that's really interesting.
Because they get pigeonholed, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
and people muddle through life as well, not knowing who they are and what they want to be, and just 9 to 5 every day. And yeah.
So I think personal branding is like a catchy term. It's really simply being self-aware and also having that power to allow others to see you as you wish to be seen.
So give us an idea of say who might be in your team the person to address someone who comes and seeks help for personal branding issues, because I'm sure they all have different areas of specialties, if you like.
Yes, their specialties are based on their passions as well. So often if we have trainee coaches who have themselves had a varied background, say maybe they trained as a lawyer, they're now a music manager, they're in comms, and they've sort of lived that sort of experience, and they feel like now as they embark on their coaching career, they don't want it to be completely different from what they've done before, and hence they say, you know what, I feel like communications is important, that concept of branding is important, so I'm gonna be a personal branding coach. And if they make this known to me in the early stages of their training, then I'm able to sort of have a bespoke program for them where they are learning how to become a life coach, but they would now be enabled to become the kind of coach that they want to be.
Yeah.
I'm going to be a devil's advocate here and throw in a spanner.
Oops.
People have, are there negative connotations when you say you're a life coach? Because, people are like, oh, another one.
But your life, my life, different one.
But I've heard that,
I see.
In the industry, you go like, oh, go see a life coach. Why? What do they know? Like you get that. I get that. I hear that.
Right.
Sometimes.
Yes. Oh dear.
Yeah. No, I do. Because,
Yes.
Especially on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Everybody's a life coach on LinkedIn.
Yes. So this is really interesting. When I first started my life coaching journey, very few people knew what a life coach was. So people were like, are you a psychiatrist now? Are you a counselor? How is this different from you being a mentor or being a professor at a university? And so I had to really take time to explain it to them. But now, over the course of the past maybe 3 years or so, suddenly, as you say, everybody is a life coach. And I say this in quotation marks. So that's really interesting. I want to look on the bright side and say that I don't have to do so much branding and marketing anymore because there are so many people out there who call themselves life coaches. And therefore that concept is more, there's a great awareness of this concept. However, I feel like it's important to explain what a quality life coach might be.
Absolutely, because I'm going to just butt in here right now because there are some people that I've used to work with and I'm like, really? You? Because I mean,
What are you trying to imply?
I'm just trying to be.
I understand.
I can't. Having worked with this person, I'm like,
You got no EQ, you got no empathy. How you can be life coach? Oh, okay. Sorry, I took the words out of your mouth.
So yes, I think therefore it's important to undergo training and training with the right coach education provider as well, because I feel like if you just learn the lessons in theory about ethics, about how to listen actively. Here are 8 steps. But you don't incorporate it, you don't embody it, then not only are you being inauthentic to yourself, but your clients will pick it up as well. So
pandai
those
cakap
clients
je,
will...
you know, as you say in Malay, clever to talk lah. Then like,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yes,
well,
exactly.
yeah.
Well, actually an imposter though, so not just a syndrome.
Just the real one, the real thing.
Yeah.
The real
So I feel like having training from the right provider is important, because that coach training provider, that teacher, that facilitator, that mentor should be helping you to truly embody the coaching qualities so that it is evident in your work and, I mean, in your life, to be honest.
Absolutely. So we trust you completely, Dr. Jade Kua.
Thank you. I feel like it really brings our classes together.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
many batches of trainee coaches who have come through Jade Academy. I feel like they've grown closer together as well, because first of all, they're from varying backgrounds. So it's interesting. It's very diverse. You know, we're very inclusive. But also as they go through the program, there's a lot of peer coaching and sharing, and they learn how to incorporate the coaching qualities into their work lives or their personal lives, whatever works for them. And so they see each other through milestones, and they can be successes like promotions. It could be a crisis like, a work crisis. And through that, they get through it together. And it's so wonderful because they're there for each other. I feel like each batch is just so powerful in that way.
A community is formed, literally.
So how big are these batches? Are there different cohorts? You wait for 10 people to sign up and then launch one batch? Is that how you do it?
So I typically work with smaller batches, so about 6, for example. Now with Skills Future Credit, we are trying to expand it a little bit more, so up to 20.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yes.
That's big.
There's one thing I want to bring. Okay, I digress again because my brain works tangentially.
You're a genius.
I'm just very confused. Burnout. That word is a very big word, especially in the corporate world, even in the entertainment industry, because we are constantly hustling for the next job, and then we take on too much. How does that affect? I mean, as a human being, there's only so much we can take on. So if you were going to, let's say, counsel or coach me, what advice would you give to someone who says that I can't deal with it anymore? I'm too tired, and but you can't stop working. As you how to eat.
Yes. I feel like you're right. So the answer to burnout isn't, well, then just quit, right? That's not what it is. At least not in the world of adulthood.
Yeah, exactly. Adulting.
Yes. So what's important then is to find out what that client wants. What do they want? Given the context that they need to continue with their job, then what is it that they want? What do they want to change? It's really important that the client is willing to put in that work, because change will happen, and that person has to put in that effort to accommodate that change in that person's life. So it's fair to say that whatever it was that got that person here isn't enough to get that person there. So that gap in whether it's skills or emotional well-being, or that effort really needs to be filled. So it's true to say that coaching is hard work. It's not just about coming in with a pen and paper and getting all the answers given to you. You're not spoon-fed advice by the coach. Rather, you're asked very evocative questions to ask you what you truly want, what you truly need. You're asked to look at your values. You're asked how you think you can actually make this plan work. So it has to be a feasible plan, and how you're going to be sure that this plan you've laid out in our coaching session is actually going to be carried out. So that accountability is also very important. So it's very practical. It's not just wishy-washy, come in and talk about philosophy. It's very practical. There are actionable steps, and we do want everyone to move forward in their lives.
Coming back to these coaching sessions as well, would there be, say, a time frame of 6 months or something that will be agreed upon with that person who comes for coaching? Or would it be, every week I want you to come in once a week, and then we have this interval and then you check back again 2 weeks' time? How does it work?
So for that, I leave it to the coaches in my team to decide how they want to have this agreement with the client. Some of them have quite routine, say once a week, for example, because they feel like without that routine conversation, it's difficult to be sure that they have carried out the plans that they said they would the last week. So I understand that. For other coaches, they feel like maybe they want to give the client a little bit more freedom to book in when they want to. So it's more like it could be 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I would say anything less frequent than a month is a bit tricky in terms of check-ins. Personally, I leave it up to the client because I feel like, you're a big boy. You can decide when you want to check in with me. And if you feel like it is too far apart, then you can book in for closer sessions. Sometimes when they're going through something big in the company, then they might book in for closer sessions. It could even be once every 3 days during that particular period.
Right.
And then when things are a little bit more stable and they just want to, have a check-in to make sure that they're tuned up. Yeah. Exactly, some maintenance, so to speak. Maintenance facials, so to speak. A lot of analogies now, right? Hair salon, going to the gym, facials. Then it might be 3 to 4 weeks. So I leave it to the client, but I allow the coaches in my academy to have some autonomy on how they want to run their agreements.
Actually, speaking of big boys, right? So how old can you decide that you want to be a coach?
Oh.
I'm sure there's no age limit, is there?
Yes, there's no age limit for Skills Future Credit. I have written in that one has to have at least completed their O levels.
Okay.
That allows them to have a certain understanding of the lesson,
Right.
And to enable it to to carry on smoothly. So in terms of the qualifications to understand the lesson, that's probably what it would be. But I also say that we look at your portfolio of work experience. So if for some reason you didn't have O levels, but you've been, working for a while in a related industry, or you've demonstrated you have some leadership qualities, and we have an interview, and I feel like, hey, you know what, this is the course for you, then we could make it happen.
Okay.
What would you say are the key attributes of an effective coach?
An effective coach needs to be themselves self-aware, because they need to be able to maintain presence in this conversation that can be very loaded with emotion. So maintaining presence is super important. They need to be able to listen actively, not just to things that are said, but things that are unsaid, as well as how the conversation is flowing in terms of the energy of the client. That's important. And an effective coach needs to be able to evoke awareness. That is key. It's not just about giving answers or advice. You need to evoke awareness so that the client themselves can actually enact that change in their lives.
Would you say the coach would be almost like a guardrail?
That is an analogy I have not yet heard. Please say more.
For the older people, they need to have a hand guardrail to go to the toilet, up ramps and stuff like that.
I see. Yes, in that sense, I would say that the coach is a form of support for anybody. So yes, I like that analogy of being a guardrail.
All right, copyright. Royalty to be paid.
Sure.
I'm kidding.
I'll quote to you.
I'm kidding.
Well, we're going to round up this podcast now, Jade. And do you have any, parting words that you want to share with our listeners or our viewers about coaching, mental health, well-being, holistically speaking? Because it's all about spiritual, mental, physical, and emotional.
Yes.
All these four, so
Indeed.
important.
Yes. I feel like mental wellness and illness are really on a spectrum. And we can be anywhere along that spectrum. And it can change with different phases of our lives as well. So sometimes we might be more stressed. Sometimes we are more calm. And it's important to have that self-awareness so that we know when we need help. It's also important to build a community of support so that they can highlight to us when we need help, when we can't see it ourselves. So I feel like a coach is well placed to be able to help somebody because of the fact that it is really about moving forward towards a goal. And we have so many goals in so many areas of our lives. So even if it's a small goal, that incremental change is so important, or it could be a big lofty goal, and reaching for that is important too. So yes, increase your self-awareness, build your community resources, and don't be afraid to seek help.
Wonderful.
There you go. Very apt closing words by our guest today, Dr. Jade Kua. Thank you so much for coming in today and shedding light on this very important topic pertaining mostly to mental health. And also we got quite a bit of dosage of what coaching is all about.
So where can we find out more about your
I've got the answers.
Oh, you have the answers.
Yes,
okay, very good.
jadelifeandwellness.com.
That's right. So that's our website. On Instagram, we are Jade Coaching Academy.
That's right.
We have a lovely clinic over at Camden Medical. So do come by and find us there. But also we do a lot of online coaching.
Okay, that's good to know.
So drop us a message and we'll be happy to accommodate.
Thank you, Jade.
Thank you.
Well, that's it for now. From Stanley and I, the Leong Form. Please continue to listen in, subscribe. We've got more episodes coming your way very soon, right?
Yeah, and also share with your friends and family about this podcast as well, because there's just so much to take away every episode that we release.
All right. See you soon. Bye.
Take care.
The Leong Form podcast is brought to you by Double Confirm Productions.
That's right, and you can stream and subscribe as well as scream all about it of our show on all major podcast platforms. You're talking about Spotify and Apple.
And we're also on YouTube, so don't forget to like the YouTube channel as well as subscribe to it. Make your comments there, leave everything, ask questions and all that. And we will also update you on the brand new episodes that will come along.